Madam Speaker, first of all, I'd like to point out that we've heard a few times these individuals are volunteers. Not true. They're paid. In fact, at the public hearing, some of us asked that question and we were blocked from getting that information during the public hearing. They're not volunteers. You get benefits. In fact, they're one of a very small group of people that are not required to get a pistol permit in the state of Connecticut. They're allowed to carry handguns without a permit. They're not volunteers. You know, if this process went through the legislature, I think that, based upon what I heard today, we would more than likely be exempting certain convictions from the possibility of a commutation. When I look at the list, the statistics that are issued by the Board of Pardons and Paroles, 44 of these cases that they granted commutations, and just to be clear, commutation is not necessarily the person getting out right then and there, it's a reduction in the sentence. 44 of them were murder, 9 of them were felony murder, which means somebody's committing a felony and a murder results during the commission of that felony. 3 of them were murder with a firearm. I think if we had put this together, which is what should have happened, we perhaps would have been exempting those things. When we hear about gun crime in the cities, and then we're commutating these criminals that are perpetrating crimes with firearms, sort of little different public policy going on there. When we look at the actual numbers of the commutations, I just want to point out a couple. Felony with a firearm, there was one case that they commuted. It was an original sentence of 5 years. They reduced 4.8 years of that sentence. Not the judicial branch, the Board of Pardons and Paroles, this panel. Another example, somebody escaped from custody. They were sentenced to 10 years as a result of that escape. Through this procedure, created whole cloth without cover of darkness during the pandemic, 9 years, 90% of that sentence was commuted based upon their own statistics that they've given us. We have sentence modification. I'll point out that a few weeks ago we debated a little while in the Judiciary Committee whether or not somebody was under the age of 21 when they committed a crime, whether or not they could apply for a sentence modification. The bill that passed the committee said 25. That is the debate that we should be having here. Who can apply for these things? But that's not what happened. This policy, who could apply, was created by essentially the executive branch through an appointment. It begs the question, well, I mean, essentially, a pardon, and as well as parole, should in most cases, if the system is working, be the exception and not the rule. Somebody gets pardoned, you bring certain things to the table. Somebody gets paroled, that opportunity was given at the time of sentencing, and based upon, good credits and, improving yourself and perhaps doing well in education and mentoring other prisoners, parole is granted. The exception, not the rule. But that's not what we see with this process. Up until this session, one of our colleagues on this side of the aisle, Doc Pettit, we all know about Doc's situation, right? And those individuals that perpetrated that very heinous series of crimes that day were originally sentenced to death, and we know the death penalty went away. But under this commutation policy, their sentences can be reduced. I don't know how anybody could find it to be favorable that in the cover of the pandemic, this procedure was put into place. We did hear the representation from the chairman of the Judiciary Committee that Mr. Pohl was specifically selected for this panel because of his background in education and drug addiction. Now, I hope that's true, but I don't recall that testimony during the public hearing. I don't, and I was there for the entirety of it. It very well could be that Mr. Pohl was selected because he doesn't question authority. We should always question authority. We should ask where these things come from. Where does the power come from? And is it checkable? That was not done here. So I think through the debate, my continued wrestling with this, I have to vote against Mr. Pohl, because you should always ask questions. Where did this come from? Is it viable? Does it make sense? So thank you, Madam Speaker.